Hi guys, welcome to another driver briefing video. Sorry it's been a little bit of a while since I did the last one, but I thought that today was quite a good time to start going with these again, seeing as the Cupra e-racer really brings something quite different into the game and there's quite a lot to go through. It's had quite a long development cycle, and there's a lot of new features to it. So yeah, let's just talk about the car, and I think we'll begin just by talking a few vital statistics. So first thing is, well, you need to ignore the fact that it looks quite a lot like the regular TCR car. To be honest, the similarity ends once you get past the front half of the car. The back end is all completely bespoke. The front end obviously loses the engine. That's completely gone. In the front is just a space, a load of nothingness where the engine was before, and you've still got the same suspension layout at the front. You've got McPherson struts at the front, which is quite a traditional suspension layout. It's pretty common on most road cars. It's got a few little drawbacks, namely that you do have to use a lot of caster and a lot of camber to actually keep the tyre nice and flat in contact with the road at all times. Which is why manufacturers like Porsche have started to move away from using that on their GT3 cars, which they did have until the last generation of GT3. But now the double wishbone. Let's just move back a little bit. In the middle of the car, you've then got the battery pack mounted really low down, and then if you go to the very back of the car, you've got these 4 electric motors that drive this, which are arranged like a packet of biscuits. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 electric motors like that sat above the differential, all working together, all driving that. And then underneath all of that, so the very bottom of the car, you've got this flat bottom with huge diffusers. I mean, really big, huge diffusers. This car has got as much downforce as a top GT3 car. So yeah, it might be a bit heavy, but it's really got a lot of downforce. So it gives it its own sort of unique flavour, which I talk about when I actually drive it in just a few minutes' time. Vital numbers for this: it's got 975 newton meters of torque at its absolute peak. That's a lot. It's got 670 horsepower at its absolute peak as well, which once again, that's a heck of a lot, isn't it? And it's weighing in at 1,680 kilos, which is actually sort of fairly heavy, but we've got used to that with the electric cars. And I'll talk about what that brings to the driving experience in due course. But for now, let's just get the car on track. I'm just going to restart that because my tyres will have gone cold just sitting there. So first thing to talk about is the drive system and what's different here. So those of you that have driven or that can remember the IDR, we had neutral, drive and S mode. So N for neutral, that's pretty self-explanatory. D for drive mode, what that does is it's just a go forwards mode. There's nothing complicated about that. It uses the battery power up, as you might expect. But in S mode, that's when the special stuff can happen. So what S mode does is it enables the regen braking, which in D is not enabled. Okay? So remember that. Now, the S mode is more complicated than simply charging the batteries whenever you lift off the power or wherever you brake. It is actually quite a big factor in how the car handles and how it behaves. I'm just going to get myself going. There we go. Right. Yeah, so as I was saying, it's quite a big factor in how the car handles, because what it does is it changes how much engine braking in effect you've got every time you lift off the power. So in D, there basically is none. It's just the sort of the wind resistance of the and the drag of the tyres that are slowing you down. But when you put it into S mode, you have quite a lot more slowing down force every time you lift off the power. But it's more than that, because you'll notice if you go through the controller settings, there are some more things that you can keybind, and you've got an option for Regen Breaking. Okay, now it goes from 0 to 15%. If you put that down to 0, it's just the same as driving in D. But if you start to play with these values here, what that's doing is it's changing how much engine braking you've got every time you lift off the power. Okay, now that regen works on the rear axle. So the more regen that you have, the more of a sort of dragging effect you're getting at the back end every time you lift off the power. So it really sort of helps to aid the car in direction changing. So it really is a big tool for you to be able to play with. You can really change the balance of the car quite a lot, in the same way that if you change your brake bias, that we all know how much that changes. But with this regen braking, you can really change the attitude of the car quite a lot when you're off the throttle. So yes, that's really a big tool to help the car change direction. Okay, so we'll just talk a bit about how the car behaves other than that, which I've not done myself any favours by letting the tyres cool down, but here we go, we'll take it for a proper lap right about now. Okay, so I said already that the car is reasonably heavy. Now, when you actually get up to speed and the downforce starts to build, you won't really notice that so much. The places that you'll notice that is when you're down in the low speed turns, especially in low speed direction changes. But that's why this adjustable regen is really useful, because it just really helps it to just change direction. As you lift off the throttle just a little bit, it just helps to sort of kick that back end around a little bit. Yeah, so that's something to be really mindful of, and that's quite a unique feature to this car. Okay, so this is the sort of turn that you might just find it's a little bit tricky, but then once the speed actually starts to build up around all the fast stuff, it is mega. It really does grip like anything. Okay, now this sort of turn here, you really need to be using the brakes and using that regen pretty high to get the car rotated before the turn. If you're struggling with understeer with this, then it's most likely braking technique. In fact, I mean, that's true of all cars, to be perfectly honest. If you find that the car is understeering in the middle of the turn, it's because you're probably doing something to initiate that understeer. You can see just there, there's just a twitch of oversteer on the way in when I'm using the brake pedal, whereas if you were to roll into that completely off the power, that car probably would understeer at that spot there. Alright, so I said already that when it's in regen mode, it will charge the batteries just a bit. It'll generally extend the range of the car by about 10 to 15%, which matters, which really helps. And with a few more things that we've got in the pipeline, namely we've got engine maps, is something that we're working on at the moment. That really is going to become quite a noticeable thing, because you're going to be able to change how much power is being produced at the rear wheels and how much power is being used from the battery. So you'll be able to turn that up and down, and then also fiddle with the regen settings, and it becomes sort of quite involved and quite strategic if you start to get into longer races. But to be honest, like the way that these cars are designed in real life is they have a sprint race format, which is almost like rallycross. So effectively, what they do is just run everything up to maximum regen, maximum power. But we can do a little bit more than that. Okay, right, now let's go back into the garage and we'll talk about a few other things. Okay, so first thing I'll just show you just because we're in here is this is that engine map mode that I talked about, which will come to you soon. You can see you can turn the power up and down, the torque changes, and all that sort of thing. But yeah, that's something more to come. And then here we've got this regen amount that we can turn up and down. But what I want to draw attention to here is something that is, well, it's not specific to this car, but I want to talk about it with this car. Okay, so tyre pressures. That's the real big thing. That's for me is quite a buzzword at the minute, a buzz phrase even. So by default, I always set up the cars with tyre pressures that will be good for a sort of pretty full left-right circuit. Somewhere like Spa that have got a lot of turns that are left and right, some straights to allow the tyres to sort of cool down a bit, so you end up with fairly equal temperatures all round after a few laps. But if you were to race it somewhere like Zandvoort, which is quite twisty and a lot of right-handers, you're going to run into problems with that front left tyre. It's going to get super hot because that's doing all the work. So what you'd want to do with this is you want to drop that tyre pressure on the front left just a little bit. Okay, now how much? Well, it's quite easy to figure out how much. So what you need to do is you have to do a few laps, and then it's going to show you your tyre info down here. Now, focusing on the front left, you've got outside, middle, inside of the tyre. This middle temperature there should be equal to the average of that and that. Okay, roughly. If it's a bit high, then you need to drop the tyre pressure, because if it's high in the middle, that means that the tyre is actually like grown, like it's become a round shape in the way that it contacts the ground. Got too much pressure there. And if you drop the tyre pressure, it'll let it sit flat on the surface. Okay, so you would just drop a few kpi out of that. Okay, sort of probably as much as 5 is as far as you'd ever want to go. But it's really worth looking at that and really using that to optimise the car, and it will really help you along, especially in longer races. You can start to struggle, because what tends to happen is the tyre gets hot, it overheats, it loses its grip, it gets hotter, it loses more grip, it gets hotter, it snowballs. Okay, so yeah, really stay on top of that. Not specific thing to this car, it's really important to look at it across all cars, but I just wanted to draw attention to that. Okay, now I think we'll leave it at that. So until next time, goodbye, and I'll see you online.